He's from New Jersey, and he spent some time in Atlanta. He's done like 20 different independent music projects, and I met him, and I was blown away by your stage performance, and I'm excited to have you here. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Here we go, Floco Torres.
I feel really bad because like everything before this was, wow, everyone's doing cool things, and then there was great music, and then this guy's gonna talk about rap. I do have these notes though, so periodically I'm gonna look at these because it's weird. I'm on stage and I'm not afraid of that, but this I'm like terrified of. I don't know why. Thank y'all for having me. Again, I'm Floco. I'm gonna try not to hold the mic like a rapper this morning. Thomas emailed me and he asked me for a title for this, and I panicked because I was like, it's not an album. Like, I didn't know I had to explain it. I thought I just had to come and like ramble for a little bit. And I just kind of panicked, and I thought, don't go with the flow, be the flow, which is a Jay-Z line from a freestyle that he did a couple years ago. He did a concert for his streaming service Tidal, and he was doing like all the B-sides. So he was doing all the songs you never hear, like all the songs the real fans actually love. And then he did this freestyle in the middle of it, which if you know Jay-Z, everybody knows Jay-Z, right? You've at least heard of him. If you know Jay-Z, he acts like he's actually making it up on the spot when really he thought about it for a very long time. But he did this freestyle and he was talking about Spotify and YouTube and how they're not like treating artists fairly and things like that. And then he said that line, he was like, don't go with the flow, be the flow. And that stuck me for a really long time because I'm a big Jay fan, one. But then two, I was just kind of like, that kind of doesn't make sense, but it does, like just the way he said it, like, and he's really good at that. And in hip hop, flow is that, like it's your tone, it's your cadence, it's your lyrics, it's your demeanor. Nowadays, it's how you dress. Like you can spit the greatest verse in the world, but if they don't like your shoes, that kind of takes it down. Which is wild because it used to be we were wearing like 7X t-shirts and no one told us that was crazy. And it was just like the bars were great and that's all they cared about. And we just looked wild. So like that's what flow is in hip hop. And it can either be pre-written or the other part, it can be freestyle. So where you're just coming up on the spot. So I could freestyle about your dress, or I could freestyle about your sweater. And it's all off the dome. And what Jay is really good at is he does both of those. And that's kind of like what I do when I'm doing verses. If I'm doing 8 bars, I'll give you like 4 and I'll scramble them in my head. It's kind of like looking at a teleprompter in my head where I'll be like, all right, here's the rest of the verse. How can I like switch this up? How can I get a reaction out of you? So I'll make up 2 bars on the spot and then go with the rest of it. At that point, I've broken the line and you don't know if it's like written or freestyle or whatever it is, and then I go about my day. All right, so I'm gonna move past that. So in psych terms, I'm sure everybody knows what the flow state is here, right? I kind of knew. I watched like a TED Talk 2 or 3 hours ago. It was like 35 minutes. It was really boring. But I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like we just call it in the zone, and you have this thing called a flow state. And all these doctors that are way more qualified than me, they do all these studies and these interviews and these think tanks and things. And they came up, they said there were 7 characteristics for like when you're in a flow state. So the first one was completely involved in what you're doing, focus. Makes perfect sense, right? The second was a sense of ecstasy outside of everyday reality. I was like, that kind of sounds like acid, but all right. The third one was great inner clarity. I was like, cool. The fourth was knowing the activity is doable, which is really important. I was like, all right, self-confidence. The fifth was a sense of serenity, no worries about oneself. The sixth one was timelessness, thoroughly focused on the present. And I was like, cool, I've been in that zone where 6 hours goes by, so like I get that. But the last one was the one that stuck with me, and it was intrinsic motivation. Whatever produces flow becomes its own reward. And I was like, hang on. Intrinsic motivation, whatever produces the flow is its own reward. And I was like, bet. So I've been in a flow state pretty much my entire life. Word. I'm like, you with me, all right. So in psych terms, I've been in a flow my entire life. Little background, I'm from Willingboro, New Jersey. I was homeless twice as a kid, like with my family, and then I was homeless alone when I was 16 years old for about a year, or whatever it is. You know, life just kind of decided that was where I needed to be at the time. And when I brought that up in therapy this year, the way the therapist was looking at me, I was like, oh, I thought it was just, everybody has hard times. And I guess I was just too calm about it. And she was like, you haven't really thought about this, have you? And I was like, no, I didn't, because at that time when I was in that situation, it was just about getting to the next thing. It wasn't about what people thought about me or whatever it is. It was like, where am I going to sleep? How am I going to eat? How am I going to get to the next situation? So I had 2 jobs. I had a 96 Pontiac Grand Am with tinted windows and 17-inch rims, which made no sense for living in my car. But my whole thing was just whatever I have to do to get to the thing. And when we're younger, our imaginations are like a little bit easier to channel because we don't have as many distractions. So during that time, Frank Abagnale was like one of my favorite people. I watched that movie, yes, I watched that and I was just like, yo, this is great. This is a teenager lying to everybody and making a lot of money. So I had one suit. So when I wasn't working, on the days I wasn't working, I would go to a coffee shop, I would like buy a paper or whatever it is, and I would just kind of sit there. Ended up learning the staff and things like that. They had no idea what was going on. I joined one of those like Ponzi schemes before online shopping was a thing. It was called like Quickstar. I ended up getting like a 3-day conference out of that because I joined this dude's team, and there was like, we'll pay for everything, we'll pay for food, and all I heard was, I'll have 3 days where I'll be in a hotel bed. No one has to know what's happening, you know what I'm saying? That was all I was focused on, was just getting to the next thing until I was able to get out of it. So I was like, all right, that's kind of like a flow thing. As far as hip hop is concerned, I've been flowing since probably about 2002 was when I wrote my first rap, and I can't let y'all hear any of that because I was way more vulgar during that time. I was talking about all the things I was not actually doing. But you know, that's what we did back then. I wanted to be a part of hip hop because of my cousins. Hip hop is black culture. I wanted to be a part of a community that I didn't really feel like I was a part of because I was different, I was weird. I had a comic book when I was a kid, The Adventures of Kevin and Imani. It was me and my little cousin, we were superheroes, you know, because that's what you think about when you're like 7 or 8 years old. And I really wish I had some of those copies or whatever. But those were just the things. So like getting into hip hop wasn't surprising to me once I got into it because I've been writing since I was a kid. And that was it just felt right. Like when I would write verses from my cousins and see them in ciphers and things like that. And there was one cipher the year I graduated high school. I built up the nerve and I wrote this verse and I was like, all right, I got it. I'm gonna be the last one to go and then I'll never see these people again. So if it's terrible, you know, they won't care. And I did this verse, it was probably like 16 bars. It felt like I was rapping for like 4 hours. And it was probably about 40 seconds. And I got like this big reaction. People were dapping me up that I didn't even like. Like it was super great. And at that moment I was like, if I can get this feeling, I don't have to be famous, I don't have to be any of those things. If I can get that feeling where nothing else matters, then that's it. So from there, I lied on an application for an internship for a record label, which really isn't my fault. Someone didn't do their job. So that's just kind of how I look at it. None of this stuff made sense. Like I wasn't in college. Like I think the community college that I went to is no longer a college or wasn't at that time. So someone just didn't do the research. But I lied on the application to get the internship and I got it. They ended up canceling the program because record labels are always like firing people and stuff like that. But it got me out of my situation. It got me out of New Jersey to Atlanta. Now I had to figure something else out. My grandparents lived 45 minutes away, so I was like, cool, I'm going to Macon, Georgia, and I'll just figure it out. All I know is I'm not going back home because I don't feel like I have one. That was it. I didn't think about anything else. It was just about getting to whatever the next thing was. So this flow state thing kept coming back as I was thinking about what I was gonna say to you today. This intrinsic motivation is all I've ever really been guided by. It's just I'm not going back in that direction, and I haven't. So I wanted to share a couple things with you. I just made songs every day. It was basically it. I made songs. I was on stage every weekend. It didn't matter. Strip club, wherever they would do an open mic, like I would do that. And I found out about this thing called Kickstarter at the time when crowdfunding wasn't like that big or whatever, and I wanted to do this album. I had a band. I was like, cool. I found out about this thing. We're gonna raise the money and do the album. And in Macon, Georgia is 10 years behind Atlanta, which is 20 years behind the rest of the country. So they were looking at me like I explained the concept of fire, that I was like, I was like, we're gonna raise the money to make a rap album, and it's going to work. And nobody believed me, and we ended up raising the $3,000 or whatever it was to do a terrible full band album that I took off of iTunes after I wised up and realized that it was not actually that good. But I saw it and I was like, this is a thing and this is gonna work. And it taught me the business side of it. And I was like, there's another way to do this without just going to the record label office and rapping your head off and hoping somebody signs you or something like that. In 2013, I wanted to make a logo, and I didn't know anything about design at that time. And I sat down with the designer. I said, hey, I want to have a logo. I want to look professional. He told me how much it was. I left the meeting, and I was just like, got to figure this out. A buddy of mine had a design firm, so I said, cool. I just kept bugging them. They gave me an internship. They gave me a paid internship for a summer. I made my own logo. And then at that point, my motivation became, I want to be able to walk into any studio, any creative house, any room, and understand everything that's going on. One, so you can't jerk me around. And two, if I can do the task as well, that's an added bonus for my resume. So record label and all of that is out of my mind at this point. I was like, I can do this without any of the things they say you need. So then I started thinking about connecting people. And the next year, I had to figure out a situation that I was in where it was, how do I get the hood and the hipsters to be in the same room and kick it? Because in Macon, Georgia, that does not happen. Cleveland, it happens. Macon, it does not happen. How do you get the young professionals that don't always want to be in the bars late at night because they get up and go to work in the morning? How do you get them to feel connected to the scene? And in hip hop, there's a thing called sampling. Everybody knows that, right? We take songs that are already there. Most of the time, we don't pay for them, but I mean, are you gonna pay for a Curtis Mayfield sample? Probably not. But, so there's a thing in hip hop called sampling where we borrow ideas. And I came across this idea called Lunch Beat. It was an hour-long dance party during your lunch break. They were doing them all over the world. They started in like Stockholm or something like that. So I looked it up and there was no Georgia chapter. And I was like, okay, bet. We're gonna do Lunch Beat in Macon, and I'm just gonna invite all of these different people that I know and get them in the room. We'll have lunch. There's no alcohol. All you gotta do is dance. We did 12 of those and we had a couple hundred people come, and it turned into this really big thing. We got added like to the website and all of that. And again, all I was trying to do was solve the problem. That was it. I didn't realize how big of a deal that was for a city like Macon, Georgia, to actually try to get those different people. And it's one of those old cities where it's designed to, like, if you live on the east side, you got to take 2 buses to get downtown. So it's just, they do not want you to be any of those places. So it rustled a lot of feathers too, because city government was like, well, we don't really want these kinds of people to be down here at noon. But I was like, but you want their money though. So it solved a lot of that problem. And then the last thing I wanted to this year, actually just ended yesterday. I've always wanted to be Quincy Jones, Pharrell, or whatever. We all would, right? You know, they're 70 and they look 40 or whatever it is. But I've always wanted to make soundtracks. I've always wanted to do scores for things. So I've just kind of put that out there. I was like, this is gonna come because everything else has, and I'm gonna just move on, and that's it. And I got a dream board in my house that has like all these stupid pictures and like all these cities I want to go to and all that, and then it just has like pictures of sneakers and stuff like that because I'm vain. But I had coffee before this too, so I feel like I'm talking really fast. I'm sorry. But what was I talking about? Yeah, so I wanted to do the soundtracks and things like that. And 2 years ago, I met a visual artist in Akron. His name is Micah Krause. He does some really cool work, and I do some community engagement work for a magazine in Akron called The Devil Strip. He did these 3 covers, these 3 like collector's item covers, and one of them was one of his pieces, and it said "Bounce Back Like Rubber." Was all it said, had a tire, like a Goodyear logo, and I was like, all right, cool. I put that on my wall, and I just kind of stared at it when I got this beat, and I was like, there's something in this. And it just, I don't know, it kind of came out, and I did this song called Bounce Back Like Rubber, and I didn't tell him for like probably about a year that he inspired that song, because I didn't know how that worked, and I was like, am I gonna have to cut him in? Like, I don't really. I told him that last night, and he was like, you would say that on the last day of the. But I ended up hitting him up and saying like, hey, you made this piece of work that I made this song off of. Would love to have coffee with you or something like that. So we kept talking, we kept hanging out, and he had this exhibit downtown, and he tagged me in it on Instagram, and he was like, I'd love to see what you could do making a song like off of this piece. I was like, all right, cool. So I would go downtown and I would sit in front of the piece and just kind of like get ideas. I would make beats. I would go down there, listen to them. People probably thought I was homeless too, because people would come out of the night center across the street, and it'd be like 10 at night, and I was just sitting over there in the dark, just trying to figure it out. So I made this song. I sent him the song. He liked it, and we just kept doing that back and forth, sending ideas. And he said, I have this exhibition coming up in September. Would you like to make the soundtrack for it? And that was probably the first time in 15 years that I was like, something actually came back and I noticed it. So I made that album. The show ran from September 12th until last night. And as we were pulling all the stuff off the wall, I was thinking about this morning. And I was just like, I have been in a flow state for a very, very long time. And that's really tight. And then I typed like 3,000 words to come in here and ramble to you. So if I could leave you with anything, do your best to channel whatever you need to. Say whatever you need to yourself within reason. Don't, trying to think of like a dictator, but I was like, that could get crazy. Just don't, within reason, say whatever you need to, channel whatever you need to. There's this thing I do is like, there's a lot of places I haven't been able to travel. So I thought people with drones were weird for a really long time, because I was like, why are you just flying these around, looking in people's windows and doing weird things? But then it just kind of hit me one day, and I typed on YouTube like Croatia or something like that. And there's all this like drone footage and sky view footage of all these cities and all these countries and places I want to go. So then I started doing that, and I was like, what would drums sound like if I made them in Croatia? And I put that on the screen in the house, and I just make beats and things like that. Channel whatever you need to. You don't have to be in that particular place, in that space, in that position. Just go. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to freestyle. Don't be afraid of the next line. Don't be afraid of the next job, the next situation. Just, it's going to come. It always does. And with that, don't go with the flow. Be the flow. Thank y'all.
This guy's awesome. Be the flow. So I mess things up here all the time. He comes up here, I'm just gonna ramble this, and that's so cool. Also, I love my drone. I'm glad you finished it that way.